you don't even want to think it will be Armageddon if this GNU fails. If this GNU fails, I am leaving this country. I'm telling you now because I know what will.
Guys, so I was listening to a recent podcast between Rob Hersov and Alec Hogg, where they were actually speaking about, the prospects of the GNU. The likes of Rob Hersov doesn't think that the GNU can implement sustainable change in South Africa, but he argues that it's the best option that South Africa actually had. And also, Gayton McKenzie also argues that the GNU, right, that the GNU has to be protected, because if anything happens to the GNU, bro, he actually says that he's going to be leaving South Africa.
Chris, I was in London and I was there for rugby meetings, and I was asked that there's 12 billionaires that is specifically requesting to see me for lunch. I was like, why me? When I asked them why me, they said no, they knew they're going to get the unvarnished truth. I said, okay. And what they wanted to know from me is, how strong is this GNU? I said, I'll tell you on one condition. If I can also ask you a question at the end. They agreed. So I explained the GNU to them. I explained how when it looks a bit difficult, there's a skill that President Cyril Ramaphosa has where he brings us all together again. So now he does it. He will even come me down and say, no, you are wrong, Minister McKenzie. You are wrong, Minister of the ANC. Because he's made us believe we are not ANC or PA or thing there. We are cabinet ministers, which that's how it should be. And when I said to the people in this billionaires in London, I explained to them and they bought the story that I was giving them, which was the truth. They then came back and I said, now I must ask you a question. Why did you ask me this and why did you want to see me? And they were very honest with me. They said, the tax system in the UK, what's happening in the UK is very anti-progress. They are thinking of coming back to South Africa and they wanted to meet with me. They've looked at it. They didn't think the GNU will last. They are now more than ever convinced it will last. So to all the politicians, I want to say this, as leaders, and I'm including myself in it, because I sometimes fall fool to the very same behavior that I'm warning against now. I'm also guilty, is that the GNU is sacrosanct to the future of South Africa. On the other side of the coin, you don't even want to think it will be Armageddon if this GNU fails. If this GNU fails, I am leaving this country. I'm telling you now because I know what will happen to this country. We dare not fail the GNU. We dare not fail, because I'm not going to sit here and see South Africa going to the ground. This is not a time for ideology and what you believe in for to test with socialism or communism or to test with different sort of economic models. We have a workable model. We are coming together. To all the leaders, we need to restrain ourselves from beating our chest and then making the GNU looks bad. Let us for once put the GNU before Patriotic Alliance, before the African National Congress, before the Democratic Alliance, just for once, because your party will not be there if the GNU fails. We are a great country with great people. Let's do it.
If anything happens to the GNU, that the GNU is the best option that South Africa ever had to really manage this really turbulent moment and this time. And, in this video here is actually arguing about that, the whole passage of the budget that we saw in the last 4 days that actually shut down the parliament, postponed, the budget readings by Minister Godongwana and all of that was actually the GNU's biggest stress test. The GNU has been tested a lot many times. Even in the beginning of its inception into power, we could see, the attacks to the GNU from the left, where, a lot of MK, EFF members, were actually trying to pick out individual members at the GNU to really water down their strategies and all of that. And Gayton McKenzie, I think even in his inaugural speech, he actually argued that, he had written a long speech. As many of you could have watched that speech, it felt like it was a speech where he was hitting at the EFF and I think the MK party. So he said he had written a long speech, but he had to keep that speech away because he felt that President Ramaphosa was being targeted and attacked by this left-wing member. So Gayton McKenzie has actually, since the beginning of the GNU, been a proponent for the protection of the GNU, the Government of National Unity, and that the GNU is actually South Africa's best chance to manage this season, especially, with the whole turbulent geopolitics around the world now, with the G20 challenges, with the challenges of unemployment, with the challenges with crime in South Africa, with the challenges of about 1,700 billionaires argued to have left South Africa, doctors, almost 22,000 doctors unemployed, almost 33,000, it's argued, South Africans argued to have changed their tax residency from South Africa to other countries. So there are many challenges that South Africa is actually going through now. And to really help still retain investor confidence in South Africa, the GNU actually was key, according to Gayton McKenzie, to make sure that at least the companies that are still involved in production in South Africa still keep going on to preserve the few jobs that are still available. Although in the height of Donald Trump's USAID pause for 90 days, and I really wonder if that will come back to South Africa. But anyway, this has actually been a huge kind of like challenge this season. And so Gayton McKenzie is actually arguing that, everything should be done to protect the GNU, that the GNU is actually one of South Africa's best options, okay, for now. And he's actually in this video also really trying to challenge the DA for, its attempt at trying to get, sort of like trying to get in the way of many GNU policies. I really don't know how this works anyway, but I think the DA actually it appears that the DA it's selling itself as the party that actually seems to be challenging the ANC in the GNU. But Gayton McKenzie is actually arguing that there are other parties in the GNU. There's the PA, there's the FF+, there's the other parties, and so the DA cannot really sort of like raise its own importance or give itself priority over these other 9 parties that make up the GNU, because it appears that the DA still thinks that it's the opposition, it's still the official opposition. And Gayton McKenzie is actually saying no, that there's now sort of like a coalition between 10 parties that make up the GNU, and so the DA shouldn't kind of like always think or feel that it's still the official opposition in the country, so to speak. And so this is actually the kind of test that's actually going on within the GNU. And as Rob Hersov actually argues, and for me, I've not really understood this for a long time, but he actually argues that the GNU seems to be obsessed about Jacob Zuma, all right? And so it appears that the central objective of the GNU is to stop Zuma. And Rob Hersov's argument is that that's kind of like might not be sustainable, because the central goal for the GNU should be producing jobs, creating an atmosphere that continuously preserves the jobs that are available, but also increases opportunities for people to have to start businesses and make people employed, all right? Because to have, like Moletin Becky argues, 50.6% of South Africa's households on SASSA or on some form of social grant, I think it's not so productive for a country of 60 million people, all right? So there has to be ways in which the GNU has to really try to now facilitate things to make sure that the productivity in the land keeps going on, rather than its fixation on preventing one particular party or 2 particular parties from getting into power. So this is Rob Hersov's view anyway. And so Gayton McKenzie also is still, many times when I listen to him, I see him resonating the whole thing about Zuma, all right? It appears that the GNU is actually really scared of Zuma and trying to do all that it can to prove itself to South Africans that it's an eligible government. It's a kind of like a government that can still save the day, and that's the way to stop Zuma. And I think in this way, in my own opinion anyway, I think in trying to really do all that it can, the GNU should try as much as possible to reduce unemployment. That would be a major goal. If we can see the GNU reduce what is argued now to be a 30 thereabout high, it's almost like the highest in the world. I don't know if it's the highest. I think I saw a chart recently. It was leading. But anyway, I don't know if South Africa has the highest unemployment in the world. But I was really surprised that it was leading Nigeria, which is my own country. Because when you go to Nigeria as well, there's not so much of employment. A lot of people actually also leaving the country, just like We see many Africans today leaving the country for better opportunities in Dubai, in the UAE. I think there was a contract that was signed between the UAE, or I think it was Saudi Arabia. There was an arrangement to really exchange doctors, and so there were many doctors that left Nigeria in droves because these other countries saw their potential and really needed them and were ready to pay to have those doctors. So imagine if this kind of contract can be signed with doctors in South Africa. I know South Africa has some really excellent doctors, some excellent minds and all that. You know, what we're going to be seeing is sort of like a brain drain. The few brains in the land will be taken. And Rob Hersov argues that if, for example, if this whole opportunity given by the US to the farmers in South Africa, for example, who feel threatened, you know, for their farms and all that, if they decide to take that offer, we'll see an IQ rise in the US. We'll see a skills development in the US, while a lowering of the IQ in South Africa. And that's what a brain drain always does. And so everything should be done as much as possible to really avoid people leaving the land, especially those who have skills and talents, to be retained to contribute to building the economy anyway. But I don't know, most of our nations anyway do not actually also see this as a priority. And for me, I'm not blaming South Africa, I'm blaming all African countries, even my own country, Nigeria, because the amount of brain drain that has actually gone on in Nigeria, how that country still functions, honestly, it's really it's really mind-boggling. But their minds, sharp minds, the likes of the likes of Vusi Tembekwayo actually argue that whenever he goes to Nigeria, the sharpness of many professionals he meets, Nigerian professionals he meets abroad, the sharpness of the mind and all of that had left the land, Bro, if that whole force can be brought back into Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, all of that, man, it's going to be crazy. But the problem we have, the challenge we have is the leadership. And so a lot of people, you know, these things have to do with personal dignity. When you have a job, you feel like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself. And then you feel like you're contributing to a bigger cause. And so that thing gives dignity. But when you don't see it in Nigeria, or when you don't see it in Kenya, or when you don't see it in South Africa, or when you don't see it in Zimbabwe, any opportunity to go to a land where your talents and gifts are recognized would be something that would be a go for. And so that's what we're really seeing in Africa. We're really trying to hope that this doesn't go on in South Africa. Share your thoughts in the comments.